All right, part 2 of chapter 1, section 2 notes. Your next heading is the Declaration of Independence. What did it do? It severed ties with Great Britain and created a unique nation. Up until this point, no political system had ever been formed on the principles of equality, human rights, and a representative government. So America is unique in the fact that when they began their process of independence and their declaration, no other political system in the world were based on the things that America's political system were based on. Now, arguments can be made that who were they referring to when they were talking about equality and human rights? But that is a different conversation. So the road to independence. Of course, we talked earlier in our focus question about the English colonists brought ideas with them of enlightenment and limited government and wanting representation. Here's a cool graphic that kind of shows the New World, and it kind of gives a breakdown and a timeline here of, you do not have to write this down. This is just learning. So in the New World, 1607, Jamestown, Virginia was the first successful English settlement that is founded. There were other English settlements before Jamestown that were lost. They don't know why. They don't know if they died of starvation, if they were, captured by Native Americans. But there were 2 colonies, I believe, previous to Jamestown that were unsuccessful. Then in 1620, the Pilgrims signed the Mayflower Compact. 1669, John Locke contributes the Constitution for the Carolina colony. So even as far back as 1669, we're discussing the Declaration in 1776. But even far back 100 years previous, this man here, John Locke, was already writing a constitution for the Carolina colony, because at the time the Carolinas were 1 colony, not 2. So then we push forward to 1754. That's when we discussed earlier about the Albany Congress process, where they wanted the colonies to unite. Benjamin Franklin. It was unsuccessful. Not all colonies bought into it. These are some popular cartoons or propaganda that would have been put up in the colonies during that time. Join or die. We have similar things like that today, like the Don't Tread on Me signs. Kind of derive from this here. You can see the snake there in that picture saying, if you don't join with the colonists, you will die, at Britain's hand or at King George's hand. 1765. So like a little over 10 years later, the Stamp Act was passed. Everyone was upset. They repealed the Stamp Act. But then they began to enact more policies, more taxations. And then in 1770, the 5 colonists are killed by the British at the Boston Massacre. And that's really when things begin to set off, the Boston Tea Party, things like that. Again, you do not have to write any of that. That is just discussion that I would be having in class with students. So again, you haven't written anything yet. We're just talking about the road to independence. In this time, these ideas begin to shape the ideal of what an American government would look like and what the actions of the colonists would be in the American government. So again, here's another graphic that kind of shows the progress. So in 1773, the Tea Act is passed. The colonists responded with the famous Boston Tea Party, where they got on board the British ships and dumped all the tea out, because we all know how much Britain and England loved their tea. Tea was coming from the Americas, so instead of letting it be shipped to England, they stormed the ship and poured all of it out that way, just in a way to boycott and anger England. So then in 1775, 2 years later, the war begins. The Revolutionary War sparks. And then 1 year later, in 1776, is when the Declaration of Independence from Britain is signed. Again, we haven't written anything down yet. Now we're going to begin taking more notes. So your next heading is state constitutions. The Congress, the new Congress of America, urged the colonies to write their own state constitutions, their own colony constitutions. We already know that a constitution sets out the principal structures of government. And then at that time, most states adopted constitutions in 1776. You don't really need to write that. You just need to know that most states adopted constitutions at this time. Just a fun fact, the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 is the oldest of the current state constitutions. It was written in 1780. The ones that we still actually have in archives. State constitutions continued. I'm not going to make you write down all these words and their definitions. Just know that they're here so that when you have assignments and you're looking for definitions, you either use your textbook or you do have them available here in the PowerPoint. It's just different words and definitions. The last thing you're going to write in this section is that state constitutions gave most power of the legislator. Remember, legislator means lawmaking or lawmakers. So it gave most of the power to the lawmakers, set short terms of office, and limited the right to vote. So still not everyone during this time is allowed to vote. It limited the right to vote. Women couldn't vote. African Americans, enslaved African Americans could not vote. And sometimes it was only wealthy landowners that could vote. The states could set up their own constitution. They could decide who was allowed to vote and who wasn't. So it's still not reached the equality that the Constitution of America, because remember that hasn't been written yet. It's just the states writing their own constitutions. So more of that will not come later until the actual Constitution is written and created and signed. And that is the end of Chapter 1, Section 2 notes. Please upload your typed document or take a picture that is not blurry and with legible handwriting and submit on Canvas. If you have any questions, please message me on Canvas.